How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Chair Talk. Guys, great dialogue coming our way today. It's coming from Russ, and the topic is 5 tips for rookie correctional officers that will help them maintain a commanding presence. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Russ provided 4 of the tips. I added 1 in. I think it's going to be a great dialogue, but before we bring Russ in, let me just tell you an update real quick. There's the picture of my new book that I have coming out. It's going to be published by Blue 360 Media, and it's called Tips for New Corrections Officers and Their Supervisors. On the back, it states this book is a testament to the dedicated individuals who choose a path of service in the challenging field of corrections. Anthony Gangi, a corrections professional himself, offers you a glimpse into the complex and essential world of corrections work. Throughout these pages, you'll discover not only practical advice on key aspects of the job, but also the intangible qualities that define exceptional corrections officers, from managing inmate interactions to navigating the complexities of institutional culture, from the daily routines to the moments of crisis. Gangi explores the multifaceted nature of corrections work. And that comes from Dr. Laura Bedard. She's the author of a book called What Do I Wear to the Execution? And some of the sections in here is policy versus procedure versus practice. We have never minimized the importance of routine work. We even do something on count time. We do safety and security as a layered process. I like that passage a lot. 20 signs you're overly involved with an inmate. We have something on understand liability. Custody is not an inmate. Custody is not anti-inmate. Sorry, custody is not anti-inmate. 10 quick tips for overseeing an inmate housing unit or dorm. Know the limits of a leader's authority. Threat versus annoying. So basically, the difference between a threat, an inmate that poses a threat versus an inmate that's annoying. 19 tips when interacting with inmates. Bridging the gap between custody and civilians. 5 quick tips for conducting cell searches, and many, many more. This book is not as big as my last book, which was How to Succeed in Corrections. This book's a lot bigger. But this new book coming out, it's got about 46 more tips that's meant to add on to this, as well as this, and it just gives you just really good, solid information. And again, that book is going to be published by Blue 360 Media. And again, that book's going to partner well with Inmate Manipulation Decoded, which is on the market. Link to that is in the description, as well as How to Succeed in Corrections. I think if I was in the academy instructor, I wanted to get some knowledge out there. You want to get your hands on these 2 books, and then you got to get this book right here. I'm telling you guys, I'm doing everything I can to make sure the knowledge, the core values remain with us. Also, guys, if you look in the description, I have links to 2 more articles I wrote recently that was published. One for Corrections One did a great job on 19 rules when it comes to interacting with inmates. And then I also have one from the American Jail Association. This is actually one of my favorite articles I've ever written so far, and it's about employee morale. And I gave you the link to that in the description. But if you guys remember, the American Jail Association is in the most recent magazine. And there it is. I love this article. Is management solely responsible for good employee morale? And this is something I'm actively involved with now in my state. And if you guys want to check it out, I would appreciate it. The link to that article is in the description. So I did a lot this month. Let me get Russ. What's up, Russ?
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going?
Yeah, Russ, I had a lot going on this month, huh?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I'm still working on a couple of things. Maybe me and Russ could partner on an article real quick and maybe push it out towards Corrections One or American Jail, which, by the way, guys, just so you know, if you're in the correction business, they're looking for articles. So submit it to them because they need more articles from people in the profession that want to share their expertise. Hey, Russ, you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Of course. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections. My name is Russ Hamilton. I've also done work as a senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work at a local county probation department and a local county jail where I am a case manager. And that about sums it up. I'm also, though, the founder of Keepers of Chaos, because I knew Anthony was going to ask me about that again. Keepers of Chaos is on Facebook, and we pay a lot of attention to actually, promoting the profession, being an advocate for the profession, and trying to bring, support, as well as training, insight, history, and a whole realm of everything corrections.
Right. And by the way, guys, if you get a chance, please check out Keepers of Chaos. A lot of good work going on there as well, including if you're in the profession, you have questions, there's great people on there that will devote their time, invest in you, and really provide you with good, solid information. I truly believe right now, I know corrections has a lot of ambiguities, but I figure that there's enough resources out there right now, whether it's what we're providing here, what we provide on the channel, what we provide on Facebook. I mean, there's just so much information that I feel if there's something that you're going through, there's resources now that we've never had that can help you through it. Now, Russ, this is a great topic. We were thinking of doing a show today, and I accidentally was going to revisit a topic on, when is it a good time to make rank? But then Russ like, hey, we just kind of touched on that. And I was like, Russ, do you have an idea for another topic? And Russ actually has a great idea for a topic, which we mentioned at the beginning, was 5 tips for rookie correctional officers that will help them maintain a command presence and professional bearings, if that was the exact verbiage. Now, Russ, why is this topic so important right now? What does this topic actually mean?
Took me a second there because my phone decided it was going to update itself, and I couldn't let that happen. So anyway, the idea for this topic is just to, try and pass on some tips, some tricks, some pertinent information to staff of any level as to what, a command presence and bearing really means. We deal with a subset of the population, that really, truly is, how shall we say, social deviant to a degree or another. They are antisocial, criminal personality disorders, and things like that. And so we have to draw a distinction between us and them, right? And then, second of all, they have to have a belief that we are, first of all, confident, second of all, competent, and third of all, professional. And being able to do those things a lot of times allows us to control a great number of people. If we go in there and we're just lackadaisical, we don't spend a lot of time, being consistent. We don't spend a lot of time, making sure that we actually do deal with some of the issues that we have. We start to lose that control and it slips back. So when we talk about things like, firm, fair, and consistent, when we talk about things like, the disciplinary process, progressive discipline, and then this command bearing, we have to know that there are a lot of things out there that can push us to a point where we can lose control. And it's not always possible to always keep control, but it's always possible to exercise larger amounts of it than we think we can. And having been in situations where we've lost that control, and I've been in many, many, many riots, this is important. If everyone is out there on the same page and exuding these things that help us, deal with that subset population, we can do a lot to really enhance safety and security of not just us, but the inmates as well.
Guys, in the book I have coming out, it really is a perspective. It really is a perspective for rookies. But I do believe that having senior staff pick up the book is also going to be very rewarding because there's a lot of lessons there that the rookies are going to need your help translating. And the reason why I came up with this book is because same thing with topics like here, it's needed because right now we don't know if these core values are really being translated to those on the floor because we're losing a lot of people. So me and Russ been on this kick of really trying to, do stuff for the rookies to see if there's a gap and then try to fill in that gap. I think that's the key. And I've done some softer topics with the rookies. Recently, we did one on creating psychological safety, having the rookies feel included so they can learn, so eventually they can contribute and challenge the status quo. This dialogue right here is going to be more of the tactical side of it all. So this is basically helping the rookie navigate themselves through basic interactions with the inmate population, but also, how to carry out their duties correctly, and maybe even what we as senior staff would expect from them. So I'm going to go real quick with my first point that I put in, and then Russ did the other four. I just want to get this out there because, again, it's sort of the softer side, but I think it complements what we're discussing here. Right when you get into this profession, I need you to do your best to try to connect yourself to the right people. Now, again, this is a softer side of our discussion, but there's a reason why I want to say this. It does relate to the tactical. So basically, in this profession, I wish I could tell you that you're going to come in and officers are going to trust you automatically. I mean, that's something I talk about in the new book. It's not. It doesn't happen. Officers or your peers are going to be very cynical in nature. And again, I've written in other books the importance of kind of giving the trust first and letting distrust be earned, because we want that family environment. But that's not the case always. But having said that, you are going to find people that are going to go out of their way and try to help you and connect with you in your efforts to be a true professional and succeed in this profession. And one thing that I want to put out there right now is why you're making, why you're trying to build your confidence in the job, why you're trying to figure out how it works and just, doing your best to try to be as effective. When you connect yourself to the right people, they're going to fill the gap, of where your confidence needs to be. So having said that, you're not going to be extremely confident in day one because you're learning and you're navigating through a lot of ambiguities. But if you connect yourself to the right people, they're going to go ahead and fill in the gap from, you being kind of, figuring out, not as confident as you should be, but it makes sense. It's day one. And they're going to complement whatever's needed for you to be effective in the unit. That's why for me, when I first entered corrections, I connected myself to the right people. And what happened was when I needed them, they helped me navigate through the ambiguities of this profession, which there's going to be a lot of. And that gave me the confidence. So at the very beginning, the confidence that I had was connected to the people that was introducing me to this profession. So very externally driven. But eventually, when I build my own experience, it does start to come from the inside out. So I just wanted to say that at the very beginning, when you're looking to gain confidence, which Russ will talk into a little bit more detail in a bit, it's going to be external at first because you're going to have to lean on the people who are going to cultivate you. And then eventually it's going to start through your experience, through your trials and errors. As long as you're cultivated through those trials and errors, you're going to start feeling confident. And then eventually it's just going to start to come out naturally. But Russ, what's your thoughts on connecting yourself to the right people at the very beginning?
The mystery with that is you're not always going to be aware of who the right people are. It's easy to get connected to the wrong people in the beginning, but you have to be able to adjust, adapt, overcome, and find your way to the right path. I would say this. I would say look for the people that exude a level of professionalism and stick-to-itiveness inside the profession. Those are the people that are, going to be your best trainers. Those are the people that are probably maybe in some form or another, they are going to mentor you. And they are the ones that are going to give you the skill sets that you need to succeed. It's when you first start, there's going to be, a number of people that are going to push you away. There's going to be a number of people that are just going to be kind of, somebody new. At least maybe they're going to soak up some of the mandatory overtime. But there'll be a range, even a bigger set of people, though, that are going to be there with welcoming arms and be willing to help you along the way. And so connect to those people, find out what it is that they have to offer. I always talk about, when people ask me, well, what's something that, I can have, a tip, a trick, something I can use in my first week. And I say, identify the subject matter experts and pick their brains, whatever that is, and then become a subject matter expert in everything that you can. And so that is the one tip that I consistently give all the time. And so that tip is very much related to what Anthony has said here about connecting yourself to the right people.
Yeah, I like that. And again, guys, it's when you first get into this profession, don't be so overwhelmed to look to belong that you're willing to accept anybody as that connection, because truly who you connect to on day one really matters. So again, you go in with who you want to be as a professional, and you try to connect to people who can direct you correctly. And you're right, Russ. It may not be that easy to figure out, but I do like to think that there is some common sense in the process, though. I mean, you'll be leaning on a lot of common sense at the very beginning anyway. So if the person gives you a bad vibe, listen to yourself. I guess that's what you have at first. Listen to yourself. But remember, don't let your want to belong supersede logic. Okay, Russ. So let's get to the tactical side of it all. So the first tip, okay, so we had mine was the first, so the second tip technically, but now we're going to the first of 4 tips on the tactical side. Is confidence in the way you look and act. So how does that manifest?
So the first thing that you have to understand is the inmates that you're going to be around, no matter where they're at, no matter which system they're at, they are going to systematically be observing you. They are going to look to find your weaknesses. They're going to look to see if you have any particular strengths. They're going to want to know if you present any type of danger to them. They're going to want to know if you present some sort of opportunity for them. With regards to, can they manipulate you? Can they break you down? Can they, put you in a position where you breach security? Can they put you into a position where you become co-opted or corrupted? So we want to ward all of those things off in the beginning of your career, and especially if you're young and inexperienced or both. You're going to want to exude confidence, and it's almost impossible to fake that. And I don't want people to fake that. What I want them to do is I want them to become comfortable in their own skin and learn how the game works, learn how the system works, so that they're in a position that they feel confident about what it is that they're doing, and that the inmates pick up on that vibe and put themselves in a position where they're less willing to risk their little bits of capital on trying to do something with you, to get in your head, to play games, and to do other things. The first thing that I always do, whether I'm in a housing unit, out there on the yard, is I watch what my posture says to the inmate, right? My posture is all about, shoulders back up. I'm looking around. I'm taking things in. I'm not looking like I'm, sketchy or crazy or skittish, but I'm looking around. I make eye contact with inmates. I let them make eye contact with me. I'm not staring them down. But at the same time, I'm not looking especially welcoming or anything like that either. But I just want them to know that, hey, I am registering what's going on. I have seen many times in my career where officers, even sergeants, lieutenants, are putting out the wrong vibe to the inmates. They go in there, shoulders a little slumped. They're looking down. They're not necessarily as aware of their surroundings as they should be. They look fatigued. They look stressed. They look tired. And that is an opening and an opportunity for inmates to do something. And so we want to avoid those things. So like I say, shoulders back, chin up, eyes up. You're looking around, making eye contact. Sometimes you'll nod to an inmate. Recognize, too, the type of inmates that you're in there with. Like in California, level 4 inmates a lot less willing to talk to you or approach you or anything else. And if they do approach you, they're going to be with someone that can validate what the conversation was about, so that they're not a snitch and all kinds of craziness like that. Level 1s, on the other hand, much more needy, more willing to approach, much more willing to be a crybaby about everything that they're not getting. So I just want to say that go out there and be intentional in the way you present yourself out there. Go out there and show that you're aware of what's going on. You're maybe willing to talk. You're willing to look at them. You're willing to listen, and that you are not, to be taken advantage of. And body language and eventually we'll get to more about the things that you say to them and things like that, mean everything to these guys, especially when they've never seen you before. Because Otherwise, they're going to be thinking that, hey, you know what? Here's fresh meat. You know, they're going to test you, you know, and don't think that you can put that testing off. But if you want to have a better result with regards to that testing, then you start in on the confidence angle and you look the part. You look the part of a correctional officer who has all that authority, you know, vested in them by the penal code and everything else. And you take it to heart and you exude that back to your audience.
Yeah, and guys, in my facility, I have a mirror that's right in the main lobby, right before you enter the controlled compound, and it's hard to walk past it and not look at the mirror. And then in words, it's got, "This is how the inmates will see you today." I think it's a great thing because, like Russ mentioned, you know, how you look on the outside could be a reflection of how you feel on the inside. So it's very good for you to kind of go in and check yourself before you go into the compound. So again, if you're in management or supervisory, the mirror was a couple of $100. You know, had some inmates do some carpentry work and going ahead and engraving some words that said, "This is how the inmates will see you today." And right when you walk in, you just cannot help but see the mirror. And I would say 95% of the people are going to be looking at that mirror real quick, do a quick little adjustment, whatever that is, and they get right into the groove of it all. And like Russ mentioned, the body language also matters. Inmates, you know, when I worked at the female facility was very spread out. It was like a farm sort of. It was very open. And when I say that I could be about I don't know 1,000 something feet away from an inmate. You know, I'm in the min ground and they're all the way up by the max. They could recognize you from your walk. I mean, your walk is just as unique as your signature. You know, everything about where your head is, your posture, your stepping style. I mean, inmates, even when you're on a unit and the way you make noise as you're stepping, you know, they're experts at just reading people. They look for every little thing. The advice that I would give is never have your head down. Again, not even just the fact that it reflects negative confidence, but also you never have your head down. It's a dangerous environment. And then again, you know, catch the behaviors that are complacent, you know, the behaviors that minimize the dangers in your head. So like putting your hands in your pocket, putting your feet up. And the best way I've done that is right before that I do that, if I catch myself, I try to ask myself what was the last thought that was going on in my head before I thought it was okay for me to kind of have my hands in my pocket and interacting with that inmate. But you're right. Confidence in the way you look and act matters because, again, these inmates are expert readers. I mean, some of them are expert manipulators, and they look for little subtle cues in how you carry yourself. And the moment they see a vulnerability, and especially if you're not aware of it, they pounce. So I think that's a great tip, you know, confidence in the way you look and in the way you act. And just one last thing, guys, when it comes to the way you act, if you don't take ownership in your position of authority, and that really does carry out, we'll probably touch on this later, but that really does carry out in how you act. You know, do you own the position? Inmates will definitely see if you don't, that's a weakness, and they will, you know, they will maneuver around you. Trust me. Okay, so let's get that one done. Okay, Russ, you also added competence in the things you do and the way you do them. So what does that mean?
Okay, so let's start with the way that we generally interact with inmates, which especially when you're brand new, they're going to start the testing process on you. And that testing process generally begins with questions. And the reason that they ask questions is not necessarily to get an answer from you, though they may ask you something that requires an answer. What they're going to do is they're going to see whether or not you know, or whether you're just going to tell them no. And so it becomes a game. So they're going to ask you something that requires you to tell them no, or it's going to require you to tell them, well, I don't know about that, so I'm going to have to get back to you. So don't half-ass it and don't lie, because they're going to know whether you tell a lie. And when you tell a lie, it looks like you're uncomfortable in your own skin, right? So the best thing to do is just tell them, no, I don't know about that. I'll get back to you if you need me to. Do you need me to? And require them to answer you back with regards to that. Don't just leave it hanging in there. I'll get back to you. Require them to, give some feedback into it. Because as long as you're doing that, as long as you're the one that's asking a question back, you're maintaining control of wherever that conversation is going to end up. So that's the first way, that we look at things. The other way that the inmates are going to look at you is about the other things that you do, you say, and the way that you do them. When you're talking to them, are you looking at them in the eye, or are you just, trying to, get rid of them? Sometimes you got to do that too. And they want to know whether or not they can expect a straight answer out of you. And they also want to know the level that they can intimidate you. And so they're checking all of those things. So that's one thing. They're also looking to see how lackadaisical you might be. And we're getting back to the thing that Anthony just mentioned here. Are you putting your hands in your pockets? Are you letting them get too close? Are you maintaining tactical distancing? I always like to, ward them off. I like to take a little, bladed stance to them, let them know, hey, what do you need, guys? But give them a little, ward off with the hand, put it up there. Don't let them invade your private hula hoop of space, decide where that is. And then let them have their side of that so that they can ask that question, because this is the way that you're going to start, establishing, and I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. When you start establishing a rapport where you can actually talk to these inmates, and you should be putting yourself into positions where you do have to talk to them so that you can learn how to manage these different expectations that they have, and the different questions that they're going to ask you, and the different information that they're going to need and you're going to need in order to run the unit that you're running. The other part of that, where I talk about, the way you do things, inmates aren't necessarily approaching you, but they're everywhere and they're looking at every single thing you do. And so, when you go up to a gate and you have to try 5 different keys to get through that gate, what signal do you think that that's sending to the inmate? Well, sometimes when you're brand new, you can't help that, but you should be trying to get those things in short order, and to be able to go there, access the right key, get through that gate. You should look comfortable with all of the equipment that's on you. I've seen guys that just, they go to cuff someone and they can't figure out how to pull out their cuffs. They go to, have to tell someone to, get down, back off, stop fighting, whatever. And they're jiggling around. They're having to look down at their equipment, their pepper spray or whatever. They don't know how to deploy their baton. And all of these speak to the competence that you do or do not have. And when an inmate believes that you have a level of competence, there's a level beyond which they will cease to test you. There are inmates, though, that if they think that that competence level is really low, they will take it all the way there, up to and including actually assaulting you. So you should be prepared, not just with your appearance, not just with your bearing and your posture, but with the way you handle the tools that you've been given, with the way that you address them, with the way that you're aware of your surroundings, in a way that, that's good. This guy here, we're going to move on to whoever our next, potential victim might be. So you want to exude that competence, and you want to make sure that that's there, not just for the inmates to view, but for you to feel in your heart, because that will bolster and help your confidence as well. And it just has to be a thing that you acquire over time. Though to a degree, if you think about it in concrete terms, you can actually develop it in a quicker manner.
Yeah. Now, guys, I'd like to add on that too. The competency, be realistic of what you expect of yourself on day one. And I've been in the profession now for 21 years. Russ got way more time than I have. And I don't know at this point. I know the basics, obviously, and I've always tried to evolve from the basics, but I guess because I've been in the profession so long, I kind of forgot what has been taught to me and what was truly common sense in regards to what I brought into this profession. But having said that, on day one, we mentioned before, you're not here to impress. So you have to be realistic with the expectations. You're not meant to be at your A game on day one, day two. You won't be at your A game for many years, most likely. I mean, what you see in front of you, at least hopefully from some good senior staff, is really the evolution of the basics of corrections through time. It's just what's done in the on-scene hours of just, committing to the work, staying connected and committed. I mean, that's key to it all too. You're staying connected and committed. When you see good people that do the job well, they're doing the job well because they're connected, and because of that connection, there's a level of commitment there. But you have to realize that you're not going in the profession with this level of perfection. That's impossible. I mean, you could have years in and not be perfect. I think that you have to go in realistically understanding that there's a lot that you need to learn, and to be open to that, because that is what's going to develop your level of competence. Because if you walk in thinking you have to know everything and then don't open yourself up to learning from others, then you're not going to be competent. You're going to spend more time talking and less time listening, and you're not going to develop into where you need to be. And then it says competence in the things you do and the way you do them. And Russ said before, one last thing, guys. This competency is something that could easily be seen by the inmate population, right? And also by your peers. And when it's day one or whatever, within your first couple of days, because you don't really have any, past successes to lean on, a mistake at the very beginning of your career could be very detrimental in how you process that. I mean, you may internalize that as you being a failure because you don't have enough successes to lean on, where if you made that same mistake a couple of years later, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because, I know I'm better than that. So with that said, be careful how you internalize any errors that you make at the beginning of your profession. Because if you internalize it to a point where, you truly start to believe that you can't do the job, well, then the problem is you're going to wind up, unfortunately, not being as effective as you can because you're minimizing yourself just internally. I've seen people that have put such judgment on themselves for having to be perfect that they wind up just not making decisions. They're afraid to act. They make foolish mistakes because they're overwhelmed with just, I guess, the rational side of just what they call analysis paralysis, whatever it is. They're just trying to be perfect because, they may have made a mistake at the beginning of the career. Now they're just trying to live, I gotta be better now. I gotta be perfect. And instead of them trying to do the job and learn from it, they're more concerned about their image. And what winds up happening is they wind up freezing because they're afraid to make a mistake. And I hate using the word mistake, like Russ hates using the word rapport, but it's going to happen. And for people that are afraid to make a mistake, it's because somewhere along the line, they're going to be afraid to make a decision. And me and Russ talked about this before. As you move forward in this profession, as you learn more, we do want decision makers. And yes, you could make a mistake, but be advised, a mistake, an experienced mistake, may not be as drastic as some may think it is. It's still something that's built from experience. So just be wary of how you internalize your initial attempts to try to be effective at this job, because if you make a mistake and you internalize it in the wrong way, it could wind up freezing you from truly being effective later on and really building on your confidence to be competent. Russ, yeah, I saw you agreeing with some of that. Do you have anything you'd like to say on that? Anything that I touched on?
That's just a whole host of those things where we want to exude that competence, and there's an expectation, that hey, we're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect, But the thing that we want to do is we want to strive to fulfill the mantle of the authority that we've been given, right? And there's going to be times where we're going to have to take risks, and some of those risks are going to involve mistakes. But as long as you get back up and keep pushing forward, there's no real problem with those. Assuming those mistakes, aren't of some kind of immoral nature or criminality or something like that. So just know that you have to grow into this. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and develop the confidence, develop the competence, and really exude what it truly means to be a corrections professional. Because there's a lot of people out there that aren't looking to do that, and when they're not looking to do that, then the inmates have won because they're able to breach all kinds of security, mostly in little things and so forth. But the institution, the department just isn't going to run the way it should if we don't have larger numbers of the consummate professional than we do of the people that are just not taking it to heart. The haters, the people that are lazy, the people that want to be officious. And I don't know if you know what I mean by officious. It means they just want to be able to grind someone, whether it's a fellow worker or whether it's an inmate, into the ground just for the sake of doing that. So, yeah, I hope that dovetails into what you were saying there.
No, it dovetails 100%. And guys, remember, this kind of falls back to connecting to the right people. Again, this is now from another perspective. If you're senior staff, and we mentioned this before, remember, when the rookie does make a mistake, they're extremely vulnerable at the beginning of their career. So you have to be able to approach them in a balanced way, because at the end of the day, you still got to keep them motivated. So I think part of that is, yes, I'm the rookie, and how they internalize whatever errors they make. But a lot of that is also on the senior staff, because if you start ridiculing the person, the officer, or the rookie, they may not be able to recover from that. And I mean that they may not be able to recover from that, especially if that mistake is at the very beginning of their career, because they don't have anything positive to lean on to circumvent the mistake. All right, Russ. So you got professionalism in the manner in which you communicate and deal with the inmate population. I got a link to an article of 19 tips when interacting with inmates. That's from Corrections One. I think I expressed some good tips, but I would love to hear what your thoughts on professionalism and how you interact with the inmates.
So one of the things that's important to know with professionalism is that we have to draw a distinction between them and us. And I know a lot of people, it shouldn't be us and them, and they're wrong. Okay. It has to be us and them, because the stakes of what we do are so incredibly high. That's not to say that we can't be a meaningful part of trying to do everything that we can for the inmate population as a whole, not for individuals, and to, trying to maintain, peace and safety and security and all of those other things that go along with a well-run facility. But what I am talking about is if we start to blur the lines where the inmates see no distinction between us and them, then they feel that they're running the institution, and they also feel that they are entitled then to engage in all kinds of criminality. And I'll tell you, I've seen this before, and I won't mention too many specifics about it, but it goes back to what I call, the homeboy prison guard, not correctional officer, the homeboy prison guard who is more comfortable with the inmates than he or she ought to be, right? So that could be homegirl too, where that person has blurred the lines and, actually in there, and I've seen this a few times, in there playing cards with the inmate, not professional, in there discussing things that clearly are inappropriate with the inmates. They are not there, carrying on and putting on, that badge which establishes is that barrier between us and them. And instead they're eroding it. And we really need the inmate population to see us as professionals, because that's where we make the difference with being able to operate and keep so many more individuals. I mean, they outnumber us in every way, right? We're able to, establish and keep that control because they do see that difference. And I think that that's important. And I think it's important at the very ground level for individual officers who are seeking to maximize that control, not in that officious manner, not in that thing of, trying to grind inmates down or trying to be, conflictual without a reason for it. There's a reason at times to create conflict with an inmate, believe me, but it's not all the time, every single day. And so what we don't want is we don't want people that are fire starters. We want people that are fire preventers out there. And so the only way that you can do that is by being that consummate professional who exudes that confidence, who exudes that competence, and has developed a way to be able to talk to the inmate population. And I see so many times, there's people, they won't talk to them, or they'll just tell them that's not my job, or they will do something to purposely cause a conflict, to cause an argument. And then the next thing we're put in a position where, we used force and we were in the right, but we didn't necessarily have to go there. Your chances to use force are going to happen a lot, whether you do the wrong thing or not. So what we want to do is we want to deconflict and de-escalate when and where we can. But that, again, too, in and of itself, is not every time, every day either. There's a lot of nuance to what goes on in the true heart of a professional.
Yeah, and Russ, in my new book I have coming out, I have a little passage on chasing conflict. Chasing conflict is reactionary at the very beginning because you're trying to make sure that you're able to say no and you're not avoiding problems when they occur. It's not you're causing problems, you are reacting to them. And the moment you see, even if it's just a minor infraction, you're going to address it to get used to having that level of authority and that level of, being able to correct people so you can kind of practice the art of saying no. Eventually that lessens. But yes, I think that's very key in regards to your professional predictability. There's a quote that you have in my upcoming book as well that talks about being professionally predictable and what does that mean as opposed to being behaviorally predictable. Basically, I'm going to do my count, but I don't need to tell you when I'm going to do my count, just to get the difference there. But you want respect. Respect does come when you're consistent in your efforts to be professional. And we'll probably get into this a little more when it comes to being assertive versus being aggressive. But having said that, this isn't a win-loss. It's not a win-loss. It really isn't. If you let the emotional side get to you when dealing with the inmates, you're going to make very bad decisions because there'll be decisions just solely based on emotional. But then you're going to tire yourself out really quick at the beginning of this profession. I mean, just really quick, you'll tire yourself out. You have to know when to let it go. And that's part of being a professional. It really is. It's like, hey, I'm not here to judge what you have done. I'm here just to carry out what my prescribed role is. And again, if you do it consistently, you have that professional predictability that we talked about. You start getting the respect from most of the inmates on the compound. So I definitely think that's great advice. And trust and believe. I think when it comes to the professionalism side, I think that this is outside of the games that inmates could play. I think the boundaries are pretty much there. I think you should know what those boundaries are. And I think that, to be honest with you, when people say they just didn't know, and you're talking about being professional versus not being professional, I don't know. I kind of find that, okay, yeah, I believe that there is some level of learning in this profession when it comes to be competent and interacting with inmates. I get it. But I think their professionalism, a lot of it really falls into common sense. Treat others as you would want to be treated, but just know that there's boundaries in this profession. So again, and that's why I think when someone gets involved with an inmate, it gets us so frustrated because it's like we just feel that there's so many common sense rule violations that led to that point. Again, I think that's a dialogue in itself, and I think that's something we need to explore later on, Russ, of what we had to teach or what we had to be taught and what really was common sense. I think being professional in this profession is a big part of common sense. It really is. And when you cross that line, it's just unforgivable. Now, Russ, this is an interesting part of the dialogue. We've touched on this before, but it's good to put this in because it does relate to the tactical side. Now, being assertive versus being aggressive. Now, guys, I want to mention something real quick before we go into this. And me and Russ has done this before. How a word is defined on the outside may not be how the word is defined on the inside. We've made adjustments to a few words. One of them recently was complacency. Now, this one's the same thing. Being assertive versus being aggressive may have different meanings because it's kind of like two different worlds. And I think people need to know the difference because I see a lot of rookies coming in that believe they have to be aggressive and they have to carry out aggression throughout their career. That's actually in the new book. And it's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. I don't know who's teaching you that. But Russ, what's your thoughts? Because I have a couple of things that after you say your thoughts, I thought we could break into that lean more towards the assertive side. But just to give you a definition of what it is on the outside, what is assertiveness? Assertiveness is a helpful way of communicating that is clear, direct, and constructive. It's built on the understanding that your own needs and another's needs are both important to consider and that both deserve to be respected. That's the key right there, is the needs of both parties. What is aggressiveness? Aggressiveness, on the other hand, is a way of communicating where you try to control the behavior of others. You put your own needs first without any consideration for the other person's needs. Now, does this role transition? It could, but Russ, how do these words play out in corrections? Is there a time to be assertive? Is there a time to be aggressive? And how does this all transition?
Okay, so when at all possible, where I want to stay, most of the time, as much as I possibly can, is in the assertive side of things. Assertive, the easiest way I can tell you guys to think about this is assertive when I'm talking to you or when I'm talking to an inmate is I win and the inmate wins. I win and you win. And there doesn't have to be any losers in this. I am generally, using a tone that's respectful. It's, usually full of requests and not orders. And it's never done in a way with something, being said that's, snide or condescending. And it's devoid of orders. But at the same time, there is an element of expectation, right? And that expectation is that inmate or that person that I'm talking to is that they are going to do what I'm asking them to do. And the reason that we keep things there is we don't want to paint inmates into a corner, especially in front of, the people that they have to live with all the time. Because if they give that indication that makes them look like they're punked out or whatever, then they have a much harder time living in the area that they've been living in, or they're put into a position where they have to escalate the situation. None of those things are healthy for us. We want to put ourselves in a position where we're not having to use a bunch of force all the time. That's going to come whether we're successful in this endeavor or not. So why make it worse? And we just have to think about the way that we're talking to people. And so, it's easy. Just say, hey, you know what, inmate Smith, I need you to go down and talk to the sergeant. And, we'll meet resistance, right? But I'm not going to start, resistance with, well, if you don't, I'm going to cuff you up. Now what have I done? I've blown the situation up into something that it doesn't have to be. I said, yeah, he's ready for you. Yeah, it's time to, have that disciplinary hearing. So, you know what? Best of luck to you, but he needs to down in his office right now. All right. And so that's just a level of assertiveness. I've given him the message that I need to give him. But you know what? I've given him a little bit of play, a little bit of understanding. I'm not trying to, ambush him or mislead him about what's going on. And for that, usually you will get, some kind of compliance. And so that's where we want to be with that. But no matter where the conversation is that's where we want to try and stay and operate within that level of assertiveness. Because once we take it outside of that and we go to the aggressive, and there is a time and place, believe me, to be aggressive, there's almost never any backing down from that. So we always want to be smart in what we're doing. We always want to have an end game, inside. And the end game is not wrestling an inmate into cuffs every damn time that you have some type of interaction. That's not what we're here to do. We're going to end up doing that. And sometimes we're going to end up doing that a lot of the time. But there's a reason that we want to obviate doing it all of the time, because, one, you get under the microscope, you get investigated, it looks bad no matter how much you're in the right. And then things get called into question. And then worst of all, though, the inmate gets hurt. We get hurt. Something even worse happens. Somebody's responding and has a heart attack. There's a lot that we can do to take that and, tamp that fire out without having to be on that aggressive side. Having said that, there is a time and place for aggression. And the way that you should think of the aggressive dialogue is this: I win, you lose. And, it can't be any more simple than that. Inmate, lay down on the ground and place your hands out at your side. Something's happened where it forces us to have to take that kind of action. The time for niceties and assertiveness is over, because safety is greatly in danger at this point. I'll leave other people to decide, where those boundaries are drawn. But there is a time and place, where we're now giving orders, and these orders are backed up by force or the threat threat of the use of force, and the totality of the situation and its exigence. So I would say that that's a pretty good explanation, I hope, for me, about the difference between the assertive nature of our interactions with inmates, which is good, win-win, versus our aggressive interactions with inmate, which is I win, you lose.
Yeah, and guys, I mean, we've covered this in shows before. We've covered this in the books. I probably got something in the new book, definitely in the older books, talking about the difference in your approaches. For me, as I've matured in this profession, I think assertiveness also carries more long-term weight than being aggressive. Granted, I'm not saying, of course, there are times, like Russ said, you have to be aggressive. But if I come into every slight resistance being ultra aggressive, one, I'm going to be exhausted. But two, I'm not taking the time to really, if when possible, when time permits, to maybe build something longer lasting. I mean, sometimes you really have to explain to an inmate how this is going to benefit them in the long run. A lot of them are very impulsive. They want the things immediately. And most of our times when we have like conflict is because they want something now that they have to wait for. And, to try to explain the process doesn't mean I have to go in there all the time, be aggressive with it. It's like, are you done? Okay, I hear what you had to say, but let me go ahead and express, what I got to say. And by the way, I'll put two words together right now that I don't think we've ever put together before. With the changes of use of force, I even think attempts to de-escalate are also sort of assertive in nature, because I'm not negotiating. If you look at the definition of assertive here, assertiveness literally says assertiveness is a helpful way of communicating that is clear, direct, and constructive. It's built on the understanding that your own needs and another's needs are both important to consider and that both deserve to be respected. I think that fits perfectly well, where assertiveness and de-escalation kind of blend in regards to how that would be applied. I mean, would you agree to that, Russ? Because if you're
Yeah. I think
Okay.
people. I was gonna say. I think some people confuse de-escalation with capitulation. We can't just capitulate to anything and everything that some inmate or some segment of the inmate population, wants from us. And yet, the idea sometimes, the kinder, gentler, and some of the back and forth on that is just terrible. Really, from I believe a political aspect that we see, from some of our supposed leaders. They've backed us into a corner, but at the same time, some of these, more aggressive, can't talk to an inmate officer, the one-trick ponies, as I call them. Their one trick is they manage to blow things up, and then it takes a lot less time to end up wrestling a guy into cuffs than it does to just try and move the situation along from their point of view. And that's the only trick that they have in their bag. They have no idea how to talk to an inmate to get them to comply without having to do the outlandish and necessary things. So I think that kind of falls a little bit on both sides. The problem that we have is when they start trying to legislate discretion. When they start trying to legislate decision making that's in that in the nature, now I've lost the word, whatever it is, but discretionary decision making.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to have that, at our beck and call, to be able to sort things out, but they want to take it away from us. And so, that's not good. And we need officers to really be able to have a whole host of different talents and not be limited to, the square peg going through the round hole kind of approach that I see some of them taking. I want officers to be able to be out there and have a range of communication, but also at the same time, when it's that time to go, that they can wrestle that inmate right into cuffs with the best of them. So we just need people with lots of different talents out there, and people need to be able to become flexible and more talented, as it were.
I think the public's also got to understand the difference between assertive and aggressive too. I think they kind of believe being assertive is aggressive. But when you see here, it really is about building some level of long-term relationships. Now, granted, the assertiveness here, if I read it further, the definition gets truly a little bit soft. So I'm not going to read the full definition because I don't think it applies in our profession. But, I like when it says that when you're assertive, it reduces the power struggle. Like Russ said, this is going to be a win-win. Just let me tell you how, And again, not all cases, but usually if there's an urgency on time, some people tend to switch to the aggressive mode because they want to immediately resolve something. But you have to ask yourself, what am I resolving here? I would be very weary of how you let the pressure of time affect your decision making, because someone puts a time frame on it doesn't mean it's a threat. It doesn't mean it becomes more emergent. Granted, I don't want you to kind of not take note of time. I'm not saying that, but all because someone says, because time could be a tactic too. Just be very wary of that. I'm throwing that out there loosely, but granted, I've seen people where, they get so caught up with having to, move something. I got to get this movement going. I got 2 minutes left. Fuck it. You're getting handcuffed without even hearing the inmate's side. So be wary of time and how it could pressure you to go from assertive to aggressive. Because as Russ said, I think that the aggressive part really should come in play when there's an emergency need to really put your hands on that inmate and get what Russ used in the book, I think, was a penological objective. because the biggest concern here is that you get aggressive just to bring someone to school. That was the scenario you brought in the quote in the more recent book. And then, one last thing, it also builds confidence too, because when you're assertive, you're going back to the communication skills. You're going back to trying to communicate, really trying to figure out how these interactions with the inmate population work. So I definitely think that when you're assertive, it builds in those skills as opposed to being aggressive and just like, for me, if I see someone constantly being aggressive, I start to question their skills at other areas. Now, granted, I'm not saying there are times, as Russ said, there's times when it's needed, but if I got an officer that's constantly doing it, I may wind up talking to them one day and saying, hey, I know you keep on, aggressive, but how's your talking skills? Because I've seen people that literally don't know how to talk to inmates, and every interaction is putting the inmate in handcuffs, and then you could have someone else run the unit and they just know how to communicate well. But it's not that they're weak. It's not like they're letting the inmates walk all over them. It's just the officer knows how to get the job done because he communicates respect through whatever those expectations are. The professional predictability, if you will. Hey, Rush, you have anything you'd like to say in close? I thought this was a great topic.
Yeah. Especially for you rookies out there, understand, you are walking around inside a living laboratory where you get to experience how the things that you say and the things that you do and the way you carry things out affects a lot of different types of people. And you should be using that to your advantage to really, teach yourself a lot of lessons about the human condition and the way things are in prison, and be able to kind of understand, what different segments of the inmate population are feeling and experiencing. In other words, you can develop some of this, empathy, and that empathy allows you to get inside their heads and actually manipulate them. They spend so much time trying to figure out how to manipulate us that we can do the reverse to them. And that can actually serve us in a great way in actually, keeping a little more safety, a little more security, around us at all times. It's one of the things that, I used to do. I used to experiment with what I would tell different inmates. I used to experiment with how they would, react with their body language when I'd caught them in an obvious lie and things like that. So, be intentional with what you're doing and really teach yourself this profession and all that it means. And, there's just a lot of wonderful opportunities out there. And take yourself outside of your comfort zone and get out there and talk to an inmate.
Yeah, I like that, Russ. I again, not to promote, but in the book I have coming out, I think you may have did the quote for that. Actually, I have a thing. Yeah, I think because you did a lot of quotes in this one, but I have a whole section on. It's right here. It's communication skills are key. We have that, but we have where is it? It's don't. You got to interact with inmates. It's there somewhere. That's the title. Something with interaction with inmates, whatever it is. And basically it's like, be willing to interact with inmates. Hold on. Let me see if your quote is in that one. Because you have a lot of quotes here, which I'm happy. It's really good information that you always pass along. So again, the title is be willing to interact with inmates. Oh, no, never mind. The quote for this one doesn't come from you. The quote comes from Lorette Cristino, substance abuse counselor. She says, there should be a willingness, especially for a rookie, to interact with inmates, as this is the population they choose to work with. When rookies interact with inmates, then supervisors will be able to evaluate their appropriateness and boundaries, and if any are lacking, correcting them. I like that. Again.
Yeah, I not only agree with that, but the supervisor, of course, can correct you, but when you're out there actually putting into practice the things that you've learned or ostensibly learned at the academy or whatever, you're going to come up with some failures, but you should be welcoming failures, right? Failures are what failures are often what, give us the, the best teaching, the best bang for the buck. And when you're out there and you're actually, trying to, adjust and adapt and see what works and what doesn't. I mean, that's the greatest learning experience that you can have when you're out there teaching yourself, because it's happening to you in real time.
Yeah, let me give you my so this is not, I'm not going to read the whole passage, but let me just give you my last thought when we talk about inmate interactions. It says, as you observe the dynamic between the inmate population and staff, you will surely witness the extremes of inmate interactions, from overly involved to intentionally avoiding. If that becomes the norm of what you see, for the most part, you will avoid one, which is overly involved, and settle into the other, intentionally avoiding. You may not realize that there's a middle ground, which is professionally structured. Remember, whether planned or spontaneous, your intentional effort to interact and engage with the inmate population should always be professionally structured. That means within the desired outcome, the interaction not only serves a purpose, but is beneficial in your professional efforts to manage the inmate population. I do got a quote from you, Russ. Hold on, there is one here. Russ Hamilton, retired sergeant from the CDCR, and now an outstanding model for inmate rehabilitation. No, joking.
I don't think it says that in there, but
no. With this statement, Blow brings this lesson, this passage full circle. This is what he states. Remember, in corrections, just as it is in real life, there are extremes. We may look at an officer as being overly familiar with an inmate, or the inmate population. Or the inmate population. We may also see officers who never develop their communication skills because they feel it is risky to engage too much with the inmate population. Balance is always best. Being able to effectively communicate while being armored against that undue influence is where you eventually want your path in this career to take you. We want officers who can achieve compliance through assertive, positive engagement, not officers who are never effective or competent and must rely on aggression or excess paperwork. Find the balance. Don't be a fire starter. Don't be an inmate lover. Just be a professional. Russ, we got to get this book out, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I was on a chair that night.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed the dialogue. I think this was a good dialogue. I mean, the key is, guys, we're going to try to start doing a little bit more for the rookies, because we just got to kind of figure out, what's the gap if we're losing these senior staff. I think me and Russ, our next show is, I think we really have to discuss, Russ, and this is important to me, what can we assume nowadays is common sense and what has to be taught. I do think that, because as I'm looking down as prison management, a lot of the concerns I have is, if I don't have the senior staff out there modeling good behavior, because again, you're learning from the academy. I get it, if there is an academy, but you're learning from the academy. That's a good foundation, but you still got to see the magic of application. You got to see it in front of you. Now, if there's no good senior staff leading the way, what can I assume? What can I assume is common sense that maybe I could hold this person accountable for, because this is something that you kind of know going in, or, that may be basic, but I don't know. I mean, without a senior person there, is that something that we're going to have to revisit and maybe micromanage, sadly, because that's the biggest concern here too, Russ, is the concern here is that when you don't know what's kind of out there, if you're losing those senior officers, does it put management in a position where I may have to micromanage? Not that I want to, but I don't know if there's enough senior staff out there teaching the basics so we can evolve from those basics, Russ. I think we should try to have that dialogue more sooner than later. I think maybe we could break down some notes in the meantime between each other as to what's common sense, what should we expect from people coming in, and what is something simple that we would think someone should know, and then we were like, wait a second, that was something I was taught. So I got to be wary of what, I guess, Corrections 101. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Again, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.